So the whole purpose of this talk is to honor Carlo Digneo's legacy, and he was my great-grandfather. And I have 4 cousins here today. I'm very proud. There's Bernadette Digneo Gould, and here's Rick Berardinelli. And Sharon and Gina are my cousins, and their great-grandfather was Carlo also. So yay. Terry did this, but basically what it says is that I did not grow up in Santa Fe. I grew up in Nebraska. I know you're thinking, what? So my dad was stationed here during World War II, and he met my mother to USO dance in 45, and they married at the cathedral, and he moved her right back to Nebraska. So that's where I was raised. But I would come back here in the summers with my mom and stay in the old neighborhood with her, which was always wonderful. And then my life took me to Colorado, where I went to nursing school, became a nurse practitioner, and then I moved to San Diego and had 2 little girls and got divorced and stayed there and worked, and then I was able to come back here 7 years ago. So that was wonderful. And so now I'm here, and I met my cute husband Terry here. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the 19th century. This is the parroquia that Bishop Lamy found when he came here in 1850. And actually, there was a building on this site from the 1600s on, and then it was destroyed during the Pueblo Revolution and rebuilt a couple more times. And so this is what Archbishop Lamy found, and he thought, gee, I want something grander, like a cathedral. So he initially solicited the French, but there are mixed stories about what happened there. It didn't go well. I don't know whether there was an argument or something, but anyway, they were out. They went back to France. And so he said, I'm going to get the Italians. They're good stonemasons. So you can see the parroquia, which just means parish church, at the top. Oh, why aren't I using this? That's because I don't know what I'm doing. That's why. Does this work? Yeah. See the little things up there? That's the parroquia. And so he started building this, and my great-grandfather Carlo came in 1879 from Isernia, Italy. And the 3 families are the Berardinellis and the Palladinos and the Digneos. And he was preceded by his older brother Gennaro and Cayetano Palladino. And when he came in 79, he immediately began working on the cathedral. So you can see here that it's taking shape. It looks a little bit different than it does now. This is Carlo Digneo. He was born in Isernia, Italy in 1854, and he died in Santa Fe in 1927 when my mother was 4 years old. And I actually have this beautiful picture. It started out in the, I call it the big house of Carlo's on Paseo, the 3-story red brick. And somehow it fell into my Uncle Ralph's possession, and so now I have it. And one of these days I'm going to donate it, but I'm not quite ready yet to part with it. There's the cathedral that was completed in 1885, and you can see it surrounded by dirt. And the spires were supposed to be way up there, but that didn't happen because they ran out of money. And so it still looks like that today, as you see on the right. And this is really neat. Terry found these. They're clippings from the New Mexican, and it's March 20th, 1895, and it says, the cathedral authorities have let a contract to Digneo Brothers for the erection of a handsome stone altar in the grand church edifice. Carlo Digneo has gone to Cerrillos to select this stone, and it will cost about $700. And then 5 days later, March 25th, 1895, the Digneo brothers commence work tomorrow on the handsome stone altar, which is soon to be erected in the cathedral. Now, this is a really cool picture. This was in the paper in the 60s. This altar is the one they're talking about, this magnificent stone altar that Carlo built. And it actually was destroyed in the 60s. And the caption under the picture says, the Cathedral of St. Francis stands calm today, 100 years after construction began. When this photograph was taken a few years ago, the stone altar carved by stonemason Carlo Digneo at a site near Sirius remained in the church. The altar gave way in '64 to changes in the Catholic liturgy. Well, I don't think anybody in the family could ever figure out what changed, but my mother didn't even want to go to church after that. So anyway, she did, but she didn't like it one bit. So anyway, what's up there now are paintings, and it looks very, very different. Another thing I want to point out is there are crypts in the altar, and Rick knows all about that. He just told me he'd been down in the crypts. And all the archbishops are buried there from Lamy on. And my grandfather, Charlie, is the one that took over when Carlo died, and he's buried the archbishops ever since then in the crypts. And also, I don't have a picture, but on the front doors of the cathedral, there is a picture of a stonemason, and it's about eye level on the right door. If you go there and the doors are closed in time, you can say hello to Carlo. This is really neat. This is a plaque that was put up by the Sons of Italy. If you go in the cathedral and it's to the left, and a lot of times there are greeting cards in front of it, which I always shove away when I go in. But it says that it's honoring the Brardnellis, Digneos, Napoleons, and Palladino families who descendants live in Santa Fe to this day. And this has been up there since '05. Oh, and a funny thing that Terry found was that the Sons of Italy met at the Unitarian Church in the early years before this one, but that was kind of funny. So we're going to move on to the houses. And we're going to go see these today. This was the first one, and this was built in 1889 by Carlo for his first family, Angela Damiana, and his 6 kids. And this house is on the historic register as the Digneo Valdez house. And Carlo's niece, Melinda, married Felipe Valdez, and that's why it's the Digneo Valdez house. Now, my grandfather was born here, Charlie, and he was only 6 months old when Angela died. So the women in the neighborhood raised him, and also his big sister, Jenny. Poor Jenny. She had these 5 brothers, 3 of them little, and Carla didn't remarry for 10 years, so she raised all these little boys. So that's why my mother said she grew up and did not have children and moved to California. Poor Jenny. Here's how it looks today. It's really cute. I remember when I was a little girl, I'd go in there and see my Aunt Melinda, and she always sat in this big chair that was like a big queen's chair, and she was always sweet and smiling and just spoke Spanish. So here's Carlo and Angela and their first 3 kids. That's Americo on the left, that's Bernadette's grandfather, and little Jenny in his lap, and that's Joe on the right. Joe is the only one born in Italy, and the other 5 were born here. This is the big house, and we're going to get to go in it today. I had to make some calls, but finally found the owner. It's right next door in the law office. So he got married 10 years after Angela died, and he married Magdalena Delgado. And the Delgado house, I don't know if any of you know that, it's on Palace, and Carlo built that too. That's probably where he met Magdalena. And they had 3 more children. So here we are in this house with 9 kids. Well, the oldest ones were in their mid-20s, but good Italian boys, they stayed home till they got a wife, I think. And so there they all lived in this gorgeous house. The kitchen actually was in the basement. And a little fact about this house, my mother said that her dad Charlie and Americo were the executors of Carlo's will, and they had to sell it in the 30s because of the Depression, and they sold it for $2,500. It's worth a little tiny bit more now. This is my dear Uncle Buddy, Ralph, my mother's brother. And this is an article I have over there about the Sons of Italy that was in the paper actually in '88. And it was written by Ann Hillerman. And the top quotes, I put it up here because I like the quote. It said, "It was a patron system as tight as that of the Spanish. People would would help their friends come over, get them settled, find them jobs, keep them fed, and argue their cases in court." And that's my uncle standing in front of the big house and just talking all about the Sons of Italy and the legacy of the family. Here's Carlo and Magdalena Delgado, his second wife. And she was actually 25 years younger than he was, and she died 4 years before he did. It might have been the 9 kids, I don't know. This is cute, too. This is another roundabout town that Terry found. February 7th, 1893, Charles Digneo is hauling material for the erection of another neat brick cottage on his Manhattan Avenue lots. So Paseo used to be Manhattan, and there actually are still 2 little blocks of Manhattan. When you go around that corner there where it veers to the left, those 2 little blocks there are Manhattan Avenue still. And so he had all those lots, and then he wanted to keep his family close. So he built Americo's house. And Americo was married to Maggie Bardinelli. They all married each other. And this was a very beloved house for me. It's right on the corner there of Weber and Paseo. I ate many a spaghetti dinner there. I threw this in because it was cute. These are the kids in the neighborhood, of which my mother was the only girl, poor thing. And she's over there, Dolly, looking like she doesn't want to be there. And then all the little neighborhood boys. And this is in the mid-30s. And the kids in the neighborhood, everybody was Italian, Spanish, or Lebanese. And so these were the languages you heard other than English. And that's Aunt Maggie and Uncle Amerigus out there. My grandparents was on the other side. One little note that my mother's best friends were Chubby Senna, these names, Bambi Ellis and Dolly Digneo. Ellis was one of the Cinco Pintores, the 5 painters. And then Senna, we all know the Senna Plaza, right? That was Amalia Sanchez Senna, was the grand dame over there. My mother used to play over there in the courtyard when she was growing up. And my mom grew up and graduated. My mom and her mom went to Loretto Academy, and then my mom started working as a receptionist for the Catrins, which you still see that name around, the lawyers, until she met my dad and got whisked off to Nebraska. And I was giving this talk, just practicing the other day, and somebody said, make sure that you talk a little bit about the people and what it was like then. So we all know the Lenzik Theater. So right next to Carlo's big house is the great big house you've all seen. It's the Greer Mansion. Has the big white stone wall with the black wrought iron circle things in it. And Nathan Greer lived there. And he started the Lenzik Theater. And Lenzik got its name from his 6 kids. So L is for Lala, and E, I think, was Ethan. N was Nathan. S was Sarah, my mom's friend. And I was Ilya, and C was Charlie Greer. And I remember going over there when I was little with my mom to see Sarah, and we'd have ice cream out on the porch with the Greer, what they called the grandma. So it was quite something in Santa Fe. The Lebanese had the groceries, the quarries across the street. They were all grocers and had markets. So they had the liquor stores, cigarette stores, grocery stores. And then Jews had the retails. There were Spitz Jewelry and Kahn Shoe Store, Teichert's General Store. And it was a real wonderful community, very diverse. Everybody, loved each other. They were friends. Very different. And then what happened, as the old people all died in the late 70s and early 80s, all these buildings were sold. So their offices, and poof, there went the neighborhood. This was my mom's childhood home, and this is the right next to Maggie and Americo. This is now the Four Kachinas B&B. And so my mom and her brother Ralph were raised here, and this is where I would come and spend several weeks in the summer with my mom. And this was also a red brick cottage, but my grandfather stuccoed it over at some point for some reason. I don't know why. But anyway, and then my grandfather built that rock wall there, right there, that used to extend the whole block. But then when they started the B&B, they cut a big driveway in there. So my grandpa and grandma moved in there in 1921 when they got married. Yeah. And I had written an essay and I called it Santa Fe's Little United Nations. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but I just a couple paragraphs because it really gives you the flavor. So when I'd go there in June with my mom every summer, all the quarries would pour out and stream through the wrought iron gate and the homemade stone wall my grandfather built in the 1920s. They would exclaim, "Dolly's home." They didn't say Adrian's home, but that's okay. And the matriarch of the Curry family was Sitha Curry, who lived in the big veranda house to the north. And they did the same thing as the Digneos. They wanted everybody close by, so all their kids lived in all those houses. Maggie and Americo lived in the corner brick house that I already mentioned. Aunt Maggie's red and white tiny kitchen was always filled with aromas of spaghetti on the old gas stove, no matter what time of day. It was ready, and so was I. And my Aunt Maggie was always mad at me because I'd want milk with my spaghetti, and she wanted me to have wine, and she'd say, "¿Por qué no mangiare con vino?" And I'd go, the only thing I knew in Spanish was "quiero leche," I want my milk. And then she would admonish my mother for raising me in Nebraska with cows, I guess. So, anyway, that was an aside. Aunt Maggie was about 4'10", with black hair in a bun at the nape of her neck and a white stripe running from her forehead to the end of her hip-length hair. She always wore black, as she was always in mourning. My grandparents' house had a yard full of peach trees and yellow and coral dahlias that my grandpa carefully tended, and many, many irregular chunks of flagstone, as he was a stonemason, just like his father. My uncle had a quote in one of those articles that said, "My family spoke English, Spanish, and Italian. The Italian they left for when they didn't want me to understand." So those languages of Italian, Spanish, Lebanese floated through those Digneo and Curry houses as naturally as the high mountain air. Those were the days when neighbors not only spoke with each other, but knew each other's daily schedules and habits and peculiarities and raised each other's children. They breathed each other's air literally and figuratively. When I pass by on my excursions now, I can almost smell Digneo spaghetti and curry kibbeh, but not quite. Something dear has been lost. So this was my grandpa, Charlie, who continued the stonemasonry legacy. He built the church on San Juan Pueblo, which we'll get to, and the wall surrounding the inn at Loretto. I put this in because it was cute too. So that's my mom and her brother on a little cart that says 1928 with a goat. My mom said that they went around the neighborhood and asked whoever if they wanted their kids to sit in the wagon, get their picture taken. Finally, I'm in here. That's me, the kid. And that's in the yard with my grandparents and my mom in her fiesta dress and my tall, handsome uncle. Mid-50s. Now I'm moving on to some other structures that were built by Carlo. So, this is the first ward school. And he built this in 1906. And I think he was awarded $5,000 for this building. And this is how you know it now, the Ventana Gallery. Okay, right on the corner there of Garcia and Canyon. It is a beautiful building. Okay, now we're at UNM campus. This is Hodgson Hall. And this was, on the top it says, built by Palladino, and then they crossed somebody's name out and they put in Carlos. And so it was built by them in 1892, and this was the first building on the UNM campus. And it stands today, still looking great. And it was just surrounded by this huge field of dirt. I'm glad we were able to find that picture. And I think it was named Hodgson after the first president of the university. Okay, now this is a real precious one. This is Loretto Academy, and they tore it down to build the end of Loretto. Shame on them. And this was, just was right of course, next to Loretto Chapel. And my mother went to school there, and that's where my grandma and grandpa met. My grandmother was a senior in high school there. My grandfather was shoring up the stonework, and that's where they met. And I found this little quote, which is kind of neat. It says, this is from the paper, May 17th, 1902. The parochial school that is being built by Archbishop and Vicar Bourgaud and Fourchet or something, my French isn't too good, for the Roman Catholic congregation will contain 7 rooms. A large playground will keep the girls from the street during recess. The Sisters of Loretto will be given charge of the schools, and the building is being completed by the Digneo brothers. Oh, I remember going over there too with my mom. This is the fireplace at La Fonda, which my grandfather built in the 30s. And it's adjacent to the French pastry shop there. And my grandfather told me he did it, and my mother told me because she would walk down from Loretto after school and sit and watch him build it. And I've been trying to get the thing plaqued, but I can't find a newspaper article to back it up, so I may just go in there some night and carve it myself. I don't know. One other little fact about La Fonda is that the La Plazuela restaurant used to be open. It was a patio, and it was open to the sky, and they used to have their proms there and dances. This is the fireplace in my home, which my grandfather built, and my great-uncle Fred and my Uncle Ralph. And when my uncle built the house, he wanted the fireplace to look like the one that his dad built in La Fonda, so it's pretty similar. And this is the back of my home, and that's my grandpa Charlie kneeling, laying the flagstone. And this was in the early 50s. Yeah. And his helper. This is the San Juan Pueblo. Okay, Wingate now. And Bernadette just asked me recently about this church. And it was built by Carlo and my grandfather when he was 16 in 1911. And it's really, really lovely. My uncle took me out there for the first time right before he died, actually. And I have a quote also about this. This was in, this is about Carlo Digneo's Gothic outpost. Carlo and his 2 sons, Fred and Charles, daily rode the Chile line, the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, to Chamita, the San Juan stop, and walked to the work site. There they cut, dressed, and laid the soft volcanic tuff that was quarried up the canyon and delivered in rough blocks by wagon. Yeah. And right across the little dirt road from there is the little French church that was built before that, and it's exquisite. Here's the tombstone that Carlo ordered from Italy, and this is in Rosario. And so that's where Carlo's buried, and he has his two wives on either side of him, Magdalena and Angela. And my grandparents are buried on the right, and Maggie and Americo are on the left. And one of my aunts, Dolores Quintana, is buried there, and one of her babies who died. Yeah. So, some other structures that I don't have pictures of are, well, I told you about the Delgado house, and the first dam up on Canyon Road, Upper Canyon. He did that. And the Indian school, he had quite a hand in that. He donated land for the Indian school and worked on the structures there. And the Exchange Hotel, which is now La Fonda. And he also did work at the National Cemetery. And probably a lot of other things that I don't know about. And this is the last slide. My parents are on the left, Dolly and Jay. And there's Terry and I. So that's the end, I think.